Welcome back to the balance sheet, where we, on a weekly basis, cover all the happenings of women's wrestling. Before I get started, want to introduce obviously my co-host here, Billy.
What's up, everyone? This is going to be a fun one.
And this is Raj, and I want to tell all of our listeners thank you. The last 3 weeks we've seen unprecedented growth, not only in the YouTube views, but also in the audio platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Samsung, RSS. And, for 3 consecutive weeks, we have hit 4 zeros in terms of our streams and 3 zeros in terms of our downloads. And, you're listening to an average of 85% of the podcast. So, that's above what the average is for what people listen to podcasts for. Maybe you're putting it on the 1.2 speed on Spotify, which is great. So we want to thank you for all your support. I think the
Absolutely. Thank
best
you.
is yet to come. Best is yet to come. We're still learning um, the way we want to do this, but we want you all to come along for us on a nice ride. And as I say that, let me pivot. So, going into last week's episode, we were talking about Saturday night's main event and how we felt like the women's matches there were a little underwhelming, but we were very happy about, the Bianca Piper match. And we were wondering, what would Mercedes Monet and Hazuki do in the Long Beach Pyramid, which is the place where Mercedes had almost a career-ending injury to Willow with her ankle. And what was that match going to be like? Because Hazuki is a relative unknown to the American audience, but
Yep.
she's a hell of a worker and she's a hell of a wrestler. And so we all had expectations that the match would be really good. We thought it would be maybe at the level of Momo, maybe slightly under Willow, slightly under Chris, but it would be one of the better women's matches of the year. And I'm going to let you start here. What were your thoughts about the match?
Whew. I have watched it 4 times in full. Lots of clips too. And man, we really undersold what it could be. It's funny, all the times that we've had this is going to be the greatest match ever. And I think we all knew it was going to be a solid match.
Mhm.
We knew it was going to be very good. Um, they had the one face off after Hazuki won the four-way to get the match. I think that was on the East Coast out there. And obviously they had the triple threat match with Azumi. And if you look back at that match, they had really great chemistry. But I would be lying if I said that we all knew we were getting what we got. And what we got was one of the greatest women's matches of all time. And that's not hyperbole. It's one of the greatest women's matches of all time. We'll get into rating systems and all that stuff, but I think a very accurate way to ask people what they thought of a match is to look at the consumer rating, right? Um, and you're gonna have some tribalism and all that in there, but I think last I looked, it is the second highest rated women's match in North America on
Mhm.
Cagematch, behind Sasha Banks versus Bailey at Brooklyn. So think of every other match, in the last 10, 15 years, and it's currently rating higher than that. And it was that damn good. And even if you don't have it as your best match ever, your second best match ever, watch it. It was a complete beginning to end story, had everything you could want from a match, the physicality, um, the crowd, nice, smaller crowd, but super energized. And Hazuki brought it. And they kind of got the match off to like a rolling boil, kind of some physicality, but kind of moving at a smaller or slower pace. And then there were just bursts of offense and creativity. And, I think the last 27-minute match, so I think it was probably the last 7 minutes or so, just kept on building on itself. So it is one of my favorite rewatches of any match, and uh, I was just thrilled with how it went. What'd you think?
So I make the mistake sometimes of I grew up, and everybody who's listened to this podcast knows this, or if you know me personally, I grew up on Japanese women's wrestling. I watched it when North American wrestling was at a low point. Think mid 1990s, how bad North
Oof.
American wrestling was. WWF had a dentist, it had a clown,
You didn't like
it had
Isaac Yankem?
I sure didn't. I didn't like the goon. I didn't like, I like the caricature of JEFF. That was okay. Razor Ramon was obviously awesome, but I thought, mid 90s WWE was awful. And I thought honestly the first year Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair WCW was awful too. Like the Butcher, he's fighting Earthquake in a main event in 1995. Like this, like it was Hogan taking care of his friends, getting them paydays, right? That's what WCW was until the NWO showed up. So the All Japan Women in ECW gave me an alternative to watch wrestling that I thought was edgy and on the forefront of what the future holds. And the All Japan Women were even to me better than ECW. Like I liked them better. So I sometimes rate Mercedes, Becky, Bailey, Charlotte, this generation of women on this like curve where they could never surpass that group of all Japan women because I saw them do stuff 30 years ago that women now are finally starting to do. So it's like this bias I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk about historically women's matches. I'm going to talk about from 2015 to present day because I feel like pre 2015, post All Japan women's wrestling wasn't really a thing. Like once the
Yeah.
All Japan women kind of catered down and Attitude Era and all that, I don't think the women's wrestling thing got until 2015. And in 2015 is obviously the year of the Four Horsewomen, etc. So in a vacuum, I think Hazuki versus Mercedes Moné is the best women's wrestling match of this century. Now, when I say in a vacuum, why I'm saying that is if you just watch Mercedes or Sasha Banks versus Bailey, Brooklyn, you watch Hazuki, Mercedes, you put the remote control, you press mute. You know nothing about the story of Bailey. You just watch these two wrestling matches in a vacuum like this. I think what I saw last Sunday night was the better wrestling match. Now, when you add all the other elements, the Bailey story, the weekly TV, the Brooklyn crowd, the Sasha Banks entrance in a car, the horsewomen giving the curtain call, then Bailey and Sasha is better. But just as a pure wrestling match, I gotta say, I thought that was the best women's wrestling match I've seen in 25 years, since the days of the All Japan women. And I know I'm probably, people are gonna, oh, what about Mayu versus Io at Stardom? And I'm saying any of them, and I've watched all of them. That match had me hook, line, and sinker from the moment that bell rang to the time it ended. I did not know what was gonna happen in that match. I didn't know who was gonna win. I thought Mercedes was gonna lose 5 different times. I was messaging you up, she's gonna lose now. She kicked out of this, and it didn't happen. And Hazuki was absolutely made a star. If she wasn't already, she's a big star now, and I'm sure she'll be in NXT in 3 weeks. But everybody talks about what the match with her and Stephanie did for Stephanie. I would make the argument Stephanie was already going to be that because she had the previous match with Mercedes and she was killing it in Stardom and in New Japan. I think Hazuki just put herself on the map. Like I think she could come into NXT and they could give her an Asuka type of run and nobody would mind. She's that good. I thought it was just as a pure wrestling match, it was the best women's wrestling match. And I'm not being hyperbolic and I'm not being prisoner of the
No.
moment. I actually thought it was. What I loved about that match is it combined what I love about North American women's wrestling done right and Joshi wrestling done right. Like you got the crazy spots. Like Hazuki did 3 suicide dives right in a row.
Yeah.
You got the Joshi stuff that I loved with Toyota and Nakano and Hokuto and but then I also got Mercedes versus Asuka as a wrestling match. I got Mercedes versus Bailey as a wrestling match. So to me, I thought it was an A+ match, 5 out of 5, whatever you want to rate it in a vacuum. Like I
Yeah.
said, when you factor in all the other things, I can't I can maybe say it's on the level of Bailey, Banks, and Brooklyn, but I don't know if I could put it above it once you factor in all the other elements. And maybe because and we'll get to it when I have my analogy here. Banks Bailey maybe is always going to be number one because it changed and it revolutionized the industry in North America.
I do. That's a great point. I do think about what would it take for the public to feel like there was a match that was bigger, better, and more important than Brooklyn. Um, we've even had matches that the immediate prisoner of the moment was, oh, that was better than Brooklyn, right? Falls Count Anywhere for Becky and Charlotte comes to mind, and now you look back on that, and the cage match rating is significantly lower, and if you go rewatch it, you know it was a prisoner of the moment thing. So to have a better match than Brooklyn, I don't know if it is possible truly with everything being accounted for, the revolutionary part of it. Uh, but to your point, as a wrestling match, I mean, 27 minutes is a long time, and it does
Mm-hmm.
not feel like a long match. And that's how
Mm-mm.
you know that the story was told in a way that had you um, riveted, edge of your seat. Um, I watched it on my computer, just sitting on my couch watching it. The wife's watching something else. I got the headphones in the first time, and the match ends, and a little bit of time goes by, and she's like, "All right, I'm gonna go to bed." And I'm like, "All right, I need to rewatch that on the big TV." Like, I was, we finished it, and I was like, I didn't do that full. That was so good. I need to watch it again, and I'm gonna watch it on the big TV. So, um, yeah, I think a little bit of what worked in the Chris match, the full gear. I did not think we were going to get Hazuki kicking out of, or foot on the rope with the moneymaker. Um, and I was like, oh shit. And I did know enough about Hazuki to know that probably a lot of fans didn't, but that roll up package that she got her in, she finished a lot of matches with that. Um,
Yeah, she.
they did a good job on the three-way. I remember in commentary, that's one of her finishes, right? That kind of, I forget
It's
what she
called the
calls it.
Mahi Straw Cradle. That's what
Yeah,
the move is. Yeah.
yeah. So um I think for any fan of Hazuki or Japanese women's wrestling watching, that probably would have been a whole oh my god moment, because this could be it. And no, I hope Hazuki actually, if you know her background, she's not won a Stardom belt.
Hmm.
She's not won in Stardom the way that her resume
Hmm.
would have you think. And I think this is her time to hopefully, what I saw thrown out there was the white belt. Her fans are
Yep.
hoping for the white belt.
Hmm.
So um, I hope that she gets to go back home to Japan. Um, God, proud, man. You
That
come
was a
over to a
good match.
country that you haven't wrestled in. You're in the main event against one of the most famous women in the world, and you put on a match that's going to live forever, um, and stand the test of time and be talked about for forever, in regards to great women's wrestling matches. So, um, just a fantastic outcome for her as well. And I hope she does reap the rewards of it. Whatever she wants, you know, if she wants to be here and wrestle in the States, if she wants to dominate in Stardom and be a champion in Stardom, whatever she wants, she should get from that performance.
Okay, so you said a lot, and I want to touch on the. You're right. There was a moment, especially on Twitter, where every great women's match that came after Sasha and Bailey, the immediate reaction was that was better, right?
Yep.
Okay. I want to take myself out of the we part because I never in my life have thought Becky Charlotte falls count anywhere or last woman standing. I think that's what
Yep,
the
that's what it
stipulation
was. Yep,
was.
last woman standing. My bad.
I never thought that match was as good as Sasha Bailey Brooklyn, Iron Woman, or Sasha Charlotte falls count anywhere in Charlotte. I would have a hard time saying it was better than the two women's title matches that Sasha and Charlotte had on Raw. The one I attended in LA, the other one in Pittsburgh, because that match, and I said this in real time. I was in a group chat that I'm no longer in, and there's so much animosity built up towards Mercedes and or Sasha Banks that the Becky fans and the Charlotte fans hated the Sasha Banks fans, always saying Sasha was the best wrestler of the four. And they thought this was their aha. I told you. And in the chat in real time, I was like, what are we? Are we watching something? Do you guys have a different feed than me? Now, to be fair, some of the people in this group chat were in that crowd in Long Island. And I'm watching it on TV, and I said, this match is slow and prodding. Like, I don't find this entertaining at all. Like, yes, the women are working hard. Yes, the women are getting a lot of time. Yes, they're doing some stuff. But I thought both women are better than what I saw out of that match. Like, first off, Becky was acting as the heel. The crowd is completely cheering her. Charlotte was acting as the baby face. Nobody was cheering her. So that threw the match dynamic off because, as people who watch wrestling should know, a heel is doing moves to get booed. If the heel is doing these moves to get, and then they're getting cheered, it throws the whole match
Yeah.
off. Number one. Number two, I felt a lot of, I like Becky and I like Charlotte and I don't like Sasha because she doesn't sign autographs at airports and she's this and that. So I just want these two to have the better match than her and Bailey. And I got to tell everybody, it never was better. Not on my first watch, not on my 10th. And to be fair, as I watch that match, I avoid watching it on purpose because every time I watch it, my opinion of it is less and less. Like, if I thought it started out as an 8 out of 10, I have it at a 7 out of 10 now. And I'm afraid if I watch it again, it'll be a 6.5 because I think Charlotte and Becky's Survivor Series match, where they were title for title or they were that the rivalry match or whatever, that match was way better than that match. And the only reason people talk about that match as being so great is because, and we can get to this in a sec, is the stupid rating. Because one person rated that match as a 4.75, which at the time was the highest rated score for a North American women's wrestling match. So they're like, well, see, he said it. It's better than Brooklyn and Bailey, Sasha, and Brooklyn. Number one, the same person has admitted he undersold Sasha, Bailey, Brooklyn. Like he said, I rated it wrong. I gave it a 4.5, but I rewatched it and it's probably better than that. So he himself has admitted I made a mistake. And that, in my opinion, I think that's the only time ever he has said definitively, I scored wrongly. Because even on this match, he didn't say that.
No, he's arguing with people on Twitter. And it's
Yeah.
yeah. No, we'll get into him in a little bit. You're right. The match rating was like we told you, but it's got the ladder bump, which is just tough as hell. That's a tough bump.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make a match, right?
But the ladder bump that Sasha Banks took in Money in the Bank, where she got laid out flat back. Remember that? The one Alexa
Ember.
Bliss one. Yes.
Yeah.
That was I thought her back was broken. Like when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, like her back. And she said because of that, she doesn't want to ever do a ladder match again.
Said it is her toughest bump ever. At least
Yeah,
at one point she said that.
Okay. The thing with the whole like I said, that Charlotte Becky match, I think Becky Tiffany is a better match, and I think Becky Trish Stratus is a better match. And I definitely think Charlotte and Rhea was a better match.
for
And
sure.
and then there's a Charlotte Io Rhea triple threat in the pandemic era with no crowd that I also thought was better. So like me personally, that match did nothing for me. I just thought it was one of those matches where the two women went out there and said, "We're gonna do all these crazy spots because we know this one guy's rating system favors those spots because we want to get a higher rating than Sasha Bailey because we're tired of us being the sidekicks in that story." Because remember, in that match, they're the two women coming out to congratulate them on how great the match was. They weren't part of that at all. And I think, and I could be wrong here, that there's a little bit of jealousy from both of them that because again, by WWE, those two are pushed as the bigger entities than Sasha Bailey. But Sasha and Bailey are the ones who are getting the documentaries, who are getting Seth to cry, and all this stuff that they haven't gotten. And oh, by the way, that's Becky's now husband, right? So it's like, I feel like they went out there and they said, we're going to layer a match where he's going to give us this rating. We do this bump, we do this bump, we do this bump, we do this bump. He's going to give us the rating. Because if you know his rating system, there are certain things he likes and wants to see. And if you do it, Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker being another example, you can get a very high mark. Like Britt Baker said, we went out there, we laid the match out to get 5. So they're like, oh, we know what the algorithm is. We're going to go and crack it. Like that's what they tried to do. Whereas where Sasha and Bailey trump everything else for me is they didn't do that. They didn't go out there to try to get 1 star rating. They're like, we're just going to go out and have the best damn women's wrestling match of all time.
Well,
And they did it. And they almost did it, right? Maybe they did
it
do it.
it's a good differentiator for me though too. Is I actually personally tend to score because of that bias, not his bias, but just human bias. That's what's so impressive about Mercedes Suzuki and Sasha Bailey Brooklyn. Uh, I prefer to rank stuff stip non-stip because how, what you do to get people into a Mercedes Suzuki match, which by the way had no story or no TV time, very little history, and you just go out there cold and wrestle a match that makes everyone love wrestling more.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a magic trick. Um, it's way easier to hit someone with a kendo stick or jump off a ladder through a table and get a crowd reaction, right? Getting getting the full involvement of the crowd with just regular wrestling. No, obviously NJPW rules help a little bit with the 20-second count versus the 10. Um, it's so funny to me. I'll out myself a little bit as a North American wrestling fan. Um, you never see North American matches really big ones end with countouts, and uh, that's 10 seconds. They get Mercedes sold that 19 count so well. I mean, I'm sitting here going, "You always get back in the ring in 10 seconds. Like, get back in the ring." And I knew it wasn't going to end that way, but that's the magic, right? Like they get you in the
Mm-hmm.
moment. You're like, she sold that so well, and she was so. I saw a couple people we both know on Twitter, live tweeting the match, just like Mercedes, like get in the ring. But that's what we're all watching for is moments like that, and that's when you don't go into a match thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna have a near fall count out" type of deal. But I think doing anything at that level non-stip is actually much more impressive than anything
Mm-hmm.
stipulation related.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know you do rate matches that way where you feel like if you're a 4 without a stip, then in order for me to give you a 4 with a stip, you have to be not exponentially, but significantly better than the
Yeah,
non-stip match because you just don't have as much options. You can't use ladders, you can't use chairs, you can't use tables, you can't use kendo sticks, you can't use fire extinguishers, you can't necessarily even use the ropes, to just keep somebody in a hold and make it look like they're screaming, but you don't have to break it. You can hit the ref, and you don't get in trouble. You don't get disqualified. I think one of the brilliant things about Sasha Bailey is how the ref was used in that match. I don't think people talk about enough how genius it was where he tried to stop her from diving the first time. He turns around to count and she jumped over it. Like she's
Yep.
like, okay, you're gonna stop me. I'm just gonna go over you. Like I think that's why I will probably always put that match at the top of a pyramid because they did those little things that at that point I did not see a women's wrestling match do.
You know what's even cooler about that as a symbol is Sasha and Bailey did what they plan to do in that match from producers backstage and from other wrestlers backstage because ultimately the men would have said no, you can't do that, or no, we don't want you to do that, or someone else is going to do that. And so the moment of having a referee say no, you're not diving out of the ring, and her jumping over a man to do that, it, and when the way women's wrestling was booked
Mhm.
back then, and it was a male referee, not a female referee, it was pretty symbolic of what they were trying to accomplish that night. I've always looked at it that way, at least. Being told
Yeah,
no and then doing it anyway.
yeah, that's a great description of it that I gotta be honest, until I heard it just now, I didn't think about it that way. I just always thought about it as how, the ref said you can't do it, and she's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go over your head. Like I'm not gonna go through you, I'm just gonna go over you, and that was really cool. This match, the Hazuki Mercedes match, I thought was the crispest women's wrestling match I have seen since the All Japan days. And what I mean by that is they laid everything in perfect and they didn't miss a beat. Like there was no little glitch, there was no little hiccup, there was no little like in the I think in the Chris match there might have been like some slip somewhere, a little thing here and a little thing there. Um when I saw her match versus Chris, the first thing that popped in my head is okay, this might be better than the Willow match. But never when I watched the Chris match did I say this was better than Brooklyn. I never thought that. This is the first time I have watched a wrestling match since Brooklyn that I thought this match might be better than Brooklyn. This is the match, not her against. And this is the thing about it. You talk about predictions of greatest match ever. Like I said, I've said this before on this show. I've had two dream matches my whole women's wrestling watching life of this century. Io against Mercedes, Mayu against Mercedes. And both matches disappointed me. I think the Mayu match is better now that I've rewatched it a bunch of times. I think the Io match is good, but because of the Asuka, the Bailey, the interference, the no crowd, kind of not what
Not where
it
you
could have
wanted,
been.
not how you wanted
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see
yeah.
the dream match. Yeah.
But this match, when if somebody had told me Mayu Iwatani and Mercedes when they had a wrestling match, I would have expected that match. If somebody told me that Mercedes fought Io again, that's the match I would expect. I would expect that match. I wouldn't have expected it with Hazuki. But to her credit, she was phenomenal. And she came out a much bigger star out of this match than she was going into the match, which is the point of wrestling. If you really look at it at the level of win or lose, both people come out looking better and they both can make more money out of it. And Hazuki now probably does win the white belt because she has a fan base now who says, hey, she put on one of the greatest matches of all time with a one of the best women's wrestlers of all time, who's a guy Gene, a foreigner. It's time that she beats a Mayu or she beats a Utami or she beats a Saray for that white belt, whatever, however they set it up. I don't know, like as that's a pure wrestling match, I think it is better. But again, I have to take all the other stuff and then I would put Brooklyn ahead. But like that match made me realize like that match was why I love wrestling. Like that's what I
100%.
want to see out of pay-per-view main events.
Well, you just touched on something. And so anyone who, if you're one of these people, I'll say thank you again. If you watched our first episode, our mission statement, the way we look at wrestling and our argument with the way women are booked, often, no one should ever look bad in wrestling unless you're making them look bad to make them look better later, right? If there's a plan around why they look bad in this moment, and it makes sense, there could be an argument for it. But ultimately, we don't believe in squash matches, not for named wrestlers. If you're
No.
gonna if you're going to squash someone, it should be out of territory, a jobber. But um, the point of wrestling, it's like sports. We all love sports. If every team always looked good and every game was always good, ratings would be through the roof. And wrestling has that chance. Wrestlers can go in there and the loser should look good too, and they
Mhm.
should be better. And the best wrestlers in the world, Mercedes Moné, can win a match. And the term elevate is used a lot, but really truly elevate her opponent. Hazuki will make more money after this match.
Mhm.
And that's the point, especially when you have cross promotional stuff happening like this. Think about it. Hazuki and Mercedes don't even have the same boss. And they came together, AEW, under the NJPW booking with Rocky, and they put this match together, and everyone goes and makes more money after. The next NJPW Strong Show, main evented by Mercedes, they could talk about how the last one was one of the greatest women's matches ever. Hazuki could go win the white belt. Mercedes has another feather in her cap, and AEW is using the video to sell that she is the greatest, because she is. So that's wrestling done perfect, man. That's exactly what we always vouch for wrestling being, especially when you have uh, a, a PLE or pay-per-view match. Your analogy,
So
I'm dying to hear
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so and I have my props here. So I did, 2 cycle classes yesterday, 90 minutes. I think it was like 1,200 calories. I can't remember. I'm not trying to exercise count here, but I was thinking about this episode and I said, okay, who is, Mercedes Moné is a very polarizing figure, right? You would agree with this, right? Especially to the
Yeah.
wrestling community. She's very polarizing, right? Like, and then I saw that video that I'm not gonna even give the person enough time, but some stupid video, like not her Instagram live talking to her fans. I love how she does that. But somebody in that said something about a downgrade, a regression. People talk about all these terms, they don't know what
That
they
was the
mean.
TikTok live, which is
Okay, okay,
public.
okay,
So it could be
okay,
anyone on that, not just her fans.
okay. So I thought about it. I'm like, why is this woman so polarizing? Because all she wants is the best for women's wrestling. And all she does is every time she gets told she's fallen off or not as good, she proves everybody wrong. So I thought of two individuals who have been very important in my life from an entertainment and a sports standpoint. And it hit me. I was like, okay, she's part Michael Jordan and she's part Nas. So we're gonna get to the Michael Jordan part first. Okay. So for those of you on who watch the video of this podcast, this is the Air Jordan 11, the Concord, 1995. These shoes came out. Here's the funny story. These actually are my 1995 Air Jordan 11 Concords. You want to know why? Because it says it's a size 11. I was not a I was size 11 early in my life. I'm a size 12 now. So this was a shoe I had that I saved up all my paper route money and other stuff to buy. And, it has the original cut. Anyways, in 1995, for those basketball historians like you are, what happened that year to Michael Jordan? He came back, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this year, Mercedes Moné came back. Following the parallels so far, like one of the
Yep.
best ever returned.
First three peats WWE.
Yeah. She comes back and she looks like the old Mercedes Moné. Michael Jordan came back and had a game-winning shot against the Atlanta Hawks. And then the next week, he had 55 points against the New York Knicks in Madison Square Garden. So Mercedes comes back. She has this great match with Willow. And everybody's like, she's back. This is Michael Jordan. She's back. Ah. But what happened after that to both of them? Mercedes
They
Moné
lost.
goes into the Britt Baker match. Oh, she's the greatest of all time. She's gonna, Britt's a great opponent. This is gonna be one of the matches of all time for AEW. It's gonna be feud of the year, etc. And it started out okay. And for Michael Jordan, he won the first round playoff series that year. Then he faced the Orlando Magic. And I'm not comparing the 1995 Orlando Magic to Britt Baker. Okay. So I want people to understand I am not trying to offend any Orlando Magic listeners here. But my point is, they both lost. Mercedes didn't actually lose the match, but I felt like in her winning that match, she lost a lot more than if she had actually lost the match. Because at least in a loss, they're like, oh, she put her over. But because she won and the match was not good, people questioned her. People are like, oh my God, she's fallen off. She's regressed. And then she has the match with Sheeta, which also people used to doubt her. Michael Jordan lost to the Orlando Magic with Nick Anderson famously stripping him from behind. I'm sure to your delight as a Pistons fan,
Oh, I loved it.
right? Michael Jordan did not look like Michael Jordan in that series. And Mercedes Moné did not look like Mercedes Moné against Britt Baker or against Sheeta. Now, in wrestling, the other person has a role to play. Well, in this case, that Orlando Magic team was damn good. They were good enough to make Michael Jordan, the not fully returned Michael Jordan, look not like Michael Jordan. So then what happened? Michael Jordan goes and shoots Space Jam. Okay. And then Mercedes Moné goes and has this little match against Momo in Washington, D.C. that I attended. And you watch that match, you're like, she's back. She's back. And with Michael Jordan, after he did, if there's the legendary stories of when he shot Space Jam. And this is where I blame those NBA. If you're not a Bulls fan, you should blame those NBA players, the John Starks, the Reggie Millers, the Patrick Ewings, all of them who went to his Space Jam dome to help him get back in form. Why would you do that? Like, why would you help him out, right? But then he comes back, and what happens? They went 72-10. They win the title. He's back to being, the greatest ever, blah, blah, blah. Mercedes Moné, after that Momo match, ends up having the match with Chris, having the match with obviously Hazuki, and then the Anna Jay match was damn good too. So it's like they were doubted and they just needed a little push to get them back on top. So that is my Michael Jordan analogy. So before I get to my second one, what are your thoughts?
No, I see it for sure, and I hope the analogy follows all the way through because not only did he go 72-10 and win a title, but he won the next two titles and famously retired off into the sunset and never came back when he shouldn't have. Just kidding.
Yeah,
He did come back,
I
but
wish he didn't come back, but
I
yes.
know. I know. Um, no, it's a great analogy. I'm gonna let you get to your Nas one, and
Mhm.
Michael Jordan is considered the greatest of all time by many. Uh, Anyone would admit that LeBron has like a case that could be heard in court.
Mhm.
Um, I the Hazuki match, Mercedes. I tweeted he's got the goat case locked up like Gretzky, and what that means is, as great as Michael Jordan is, still argue about it. I think Mercedes is the greatest, like Gretzky, where sane, rational human being. Resume, and I'm talking resume. You might have
Mhm.
a style you like better. If you think another wrestler is better for you than Mercedes, peace out. This is art. I get it. But if we're talking resume, big matches, great matches, important matches, accomplishments, she's Gretzky.
Mhm.
Um, and so I love any Michael Jordan greatest of all time analogy, and I think that's a great one because um, yes, to my delight, people thought Jordan being on top, and people were crowing about it and happy about it, just like people were happy, air quotes, to see the demise of
Mhm.
Mercedes as she's, had a underwhelming match with Britt, and then an underwhelming all out match with Sheeta for sure. So
Yeah, yeah. So that's my Michael Jordan one. And I'll get to the Nas one in a sec. You talk about Gretzky, and obviously, I'm Canadian, so hockey is my first love. I played it. If Gretzky is Mercedes, then Minami Toyota has to be Bobby Orr, right? That would be how
Gordie
you
Howe.
would do that, huh?
Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr, Gordie
See,
Howe.
I never thought Gordie Howe revolutionized hockey. I thought he was just Gordie Howe reminds me a lot of LeBron. He just had all the numbers based on longevity, right? Like eventually, but he was consistent. Like every year, he's going to score 40 goals. He's, like LeBron, how he's so consistent 27, 7, 7. But Bobby Orr changed the way the game was fundamentally played because the defenseman never did what he did. The defenseman never took the puck end to end to set up the offense. The defense was always to stay at the red line and not let the puck get behind them and cover. But Bobby Orr was like the first offensive defensive player.
Well, I'll let you take the high ground on hockey for sure. So
So
Bobby
so so
Orr it
yeah,
is.
like that's the Bobby Orr one. So we're gonna get to the Nas one here. So hip hop, like wrestling, is art. And they've always had a little bit of an intertwined in. If you go back and listen historically to a lot of hip hop records, there's a lot of wrestling references. To the point now where a very prominent rapper has his own wrestling promotion in West Side Gun. So a lot of times, I think hip hop fans, and I'm part of this group, by the way, we love something so much that when that same artist makes music that has evolved, and maybe it's not as good, but it's as good, but it's a different vibe, we don't give it the credit because we love the original so much. So, I have props, as I said today. And then when we get to your rating system, I have more props. Okay, so for everybody who could see this is Illmatic by many hip hop historians like myself, considered the greatest hip hop album of all time. 10 songs, nine actually. The Genesis is an intro. 1994, April 20th is the release date. Sorry. Okay. This is Sasha Banks' Bailey Brooklyn.
Yep.
Every album that came before this was those women's matches that came before it in North America. And every women's match after fundamentally changed because of this. Same thing here. The rappers changed how they rapped because of this album. Fat Joe, Big Pun, the Wu-Tang guys, a lot of them were like, okay, we got to step up because this is different. I think Sasha and Bailey in Brooklyn is Illmatic. I think it's the greatest. I think, it's on a pedestal. But where I'm going with this is because of that love affair with that match, I think people have underrated Mercedes matches since that point. Like we underrate Nas albums. So now you have It Was Written. This is his second album. This came out in 1996, 2 years after Illmatic. This sold the most records, okay, of all of the Nas albums. But because it was an Illmatic by individuals like myself, and I'll admit this, I'm wrong. I was wrong then. We didn't love it because it wasn't Illmatic. So whether this is the Iron Woman match, whether this is Falls Count Anywhere with Charlotte,
I think of
whether
that as Charlotte Sasha because it the most, right? It
yeah,
sold
yeah,
the
yeah,
most. That
yeah.
was seen by the
But it's
most.
like we never give that feud the credit, maybe because of the outcomes. But like they had some damn good matches. And this is a damn good album. And this is a classic album. And this has a lot of classic songs. And it's one of the best hip hop albums of all time. It's just not as good as the predecessor. So a record executive once from Def Jam, this is a true story. His Def Jam was the home of Jay-Z at the time, said Illmatic should have been called The Gift and the Curse, not Jay-Z's album, because Illmatic is the gift and the curse of Nas. The gift of the album, the curse, he could never outdo it. Interesting. Okay. So now we're going to fast forward the clock from 1996 to 2001. In a similar sense, we're going to come to the Mercedes outside of WWE, from when she went to Japan, from when, all the stuff. Stillmatic,
My favorite.
2001, right? So this is also one of the best hip hop albums of all time. And to a lot of people, It's their favorite Nas album. A generation who's a little bit younger than me likes this album better, for the reasons of songs like my ex-wife personally, this was her favorite Nas album because of One Mic, because of Got Yourself a Gun, because of
What goes
obviously
around?
Ether, What Goes Around, right? This album also got a five mics in the source at the moment it was released, not a retroactive five mics. And a lot of people were like, well, wait a minute, hold on. If this is five and this is five, are you saying this is as good as this? No, that's not what they're saying. But what they're saying is, to many people at that moment in time, this felt just as good, i.e., Mercedes' run in New Japan prior to her injury, right? Prior to her getting injured, she was having a hell of a run. Kyrie match, triple threat match, Mayu match, Willow match, Stephanie match. She was having a hell of a run. I look
Killing
at
it.
that as I look at that as the Nas Stillmatic era, which is Stillmatic, um, God's Son album, and the Lost Tapes. Like those three Nas albums, I revere, but I might not revere them like I did It Was Written or Illmatic, but I still revere them because they're great on their own, and they don't shouldn't be always compared to the best. And I feel like Mercedes fans or people who don't want to give her the credit struggle with that. Like, yeah, maybe she's never going to top Brooklyn, but damn, she's made so many great things after that. Like Nas has made so many great albums. So the last,
Did
oh,
that
go ahead.
era, real quick, that era though too for her, she also hadn't pissed off the
Mhm.
WWE first fans. They saw it as like a fun little side quest she was doing, and actually she was very well supported during that run because she hadn't worked with AEW. She hadn't, so there was, people remember there was a lot less tribalism back then. It was almost like she was doing something fun and they were going to get her back. So cool, hey, go have fun, Mercedes. Kind of like, that's kind of the way it was looked at. So yeah, it was a positive era.
So now we come to the current day Nas, businessman, angel fund investor, owns businesses, and he made a six pack of albums with Hit Boy, the producer. This is King's Disease 3, in my opinion, of the six. This is either number one or two. This is what I look at the current Mercedes run, which is she's more mature. She has her finances set up correctly. She still is hungry, but hungry in a different light. Like, I'm going to take risks. I'm going to go wrestle where I want to wrestle. I'm going to make the matches I want to make because I have the money now. I have the security. For Nas, he did this because he doesn't need to sell records anymore. He's already proven himself. He's gone multi-platinum multiple times. He's had number one albums. He's had Billboard number one songs. If I Ruled the World, Hate Me Now. He's toured the world. So now he's like, I can make the art I want to make, and whether 30,000 people buy it or 10,000 people buy it, it doesn't matter because it's the art I want to make. And if my fans are truly fans of me, they'll appreciate my evolution. Same thing with Mercedes. I see a lot of talk about, oh, she's not wrestling the way she did in WWE. Yeah, she's actually better. She is a better professional wrestler now. Now, again, shout out to my friend Mastermind in Toronto. He always says, do you really think Nas is the as good an MC as he was on Illmatic? And I'd say he's an evolved version of himself. Maybe he's not as hungry and he doesn't have the anger that he had in 1994, 1995, 6, where he had to prove every single night I'm the best rapper in the world. He doesn't have to prove that anymore. Look, I'm not going to get into top five rap arguments because it's a generational thing. My son and daughter probably think Drake's the best rapper ever. And you know what? To their age group, maybe he is. I wouldn't agree with it, but I understand that, people look at that as my era. For me, after the six pack, I always thought Biggie's the best rapper ever. And he's still at his peak, I think, is the best. But I thought after this six pack round of Nas, he has the best discography and he put himself as the best. And I have interviewed many rappers. I used to work in the music industry. And a very all-time great rapper in Common told me that Nas changed the way he raps. Like he said, I used to rap a certain way. I heard Illmatic, I changed. And he goes, Nas is the best ever because we all looked at him and said, okay, we got to step up our game. Like he made all of us step up our game just like Biggie did. But Biggie died. So I can't say Biggie's better because Biggie sadly never had the chance to fall off. Because
Yeah,
with Nas, he had to go through. Oh, have you heard that Streets Disciple album? That thing sucks. Like Biggie didn't give us the opportunity to have a bad album because he made his first two were great and he died, and that's sad because I would have loved to hear what an evolved Notorious B.I.G. would have been, but it's like unfair to say he had the better career than Nas because he only made three albums, which is the second is a double. Where Nas has been around since 1994 and it's 2025 almost,
yeah,
and he's still relevant.
yeah. No, it's a you got to give him credit for that longevity because it's very hard won, um, both in hip hop and rock music. Think of a band you like. I'm not going to name bands, but think of a band you like. It's almost guaranteed that their best album, in your opinion, and I'm just talking to people listening,
Mm-hmm.
is their first or second album. It's either their first album and you know them because their first album was so good, or their first album was decent and then a real record company got behind them and they produced some really, really great stuff on their second album when they still had the raw energy of being poor and on the road and fighting for something. But most musical acts get, and I'm talking like rock and
Yeah,
hip hop, not so much pop, get tired by their third and fourth, and they're playing the hits now on tour and just making money. And I think of something Mike Tyson always says: really hard to get up at 6 a.m. and run when you're sleeping in silk pajamas.
yeah,
And so for Nas to evolve as a man, as a businessman, as a father person, and rap about things that are relevant, because you don't want him to be rapping at his age about what
yeah.
he rapped about it in 1994, but to be able to make that work, um, absolutely is a feather in his cap. And so to the analogy for Mercedes, um, I've come to find I don't man, the WWE women's division is stacked, and I just don't necessarily, I'm not saying I never want to see her there again. Um, she'd have her title runs, she'd have her Mania matches and all that, but I don't necessarily need to see her ebbing and flowing from the singles division to the tag division to the singles division to the tag division. She's 30, she's going to be 33. Um, I am so, as a fan, feel blessed that she's out there creating art that inspires her. She's
Mhm.
very inspired about what she's doing, and having the I tweeted it, the moxie, courage, and or balls to chase what's important to her is something that's inspiring. But these matches she's having, are entries into her catalog that most other people, are not out there doing. And speaking of entries into the catalog, we're getting a Chris Mercedes rematch.
We are. Uh, are you excited about it?
Yes and no. The main events are opens. Say no. I'm conflicted on how to book it, which I guess is the point, right? I don't know how it's going to go. So as a Mercedes fan, I'm like, oh, is she going to win? How's she going to win? As a wrestling fan, I'm over the moon excited. They're going to kill it. They're going to get more time than they did in their first match. Tony Khan is a madman if they don't get more than they got 19 plus minutes.
Hmm.
So I would expect 25 minutes, if not the full 30, and maybe that is how you book it, and maybe it's a time limit draw. Um,
I would do that. That's actually would be my finish.
I think you have to. And when I said I wasn't excited, here's where I'm at. Chris should win. If AEW was the only part of the story, Chris should win. She came so close to winning the first time. Mercedes is the heel. Mercedes shouldn't lose because she has one of the biggest matches of her career, like later Tokyo Dome versus Mina to hopefully win the Rev Pro belt, which would be her third belt. And so the way you're booking Mercedes Moné world in multiple promotions, Mercedes can't lose right now either. So to your point, time limit draw would be the way to
I,
go. Or maybe Mercedes finally does need to really cheat with some outside help to win a match. But what do you think?
I'm gonna use an analogy of a trilogy of matches that this rating scale we're gonna get to here in a sec. These three matches broke it. Kenny Omega, Okada, 2017. The first match, Okada won. And he won when nobody thought he was gonna win. Like they were shocked that he won. Well, when I watched that Mercedes Chris match, I was shocked she won the way it was booked. The second match did end in a time limit draw, 30 minutes. The third match is best 2 out of 3 falls. That's when Omega finally got the win. I would book it exactly the same way. This
Yeah.
next match at World's Ends is a 30-minute draw where maybe Chris puts the hand on at 29.98. 1, 2, ding, 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 ding. Draw. But people think Chris might have won in the crowd. Then finally they have the trilogy where Chris wins and the stipulation is best 2 out of 3 falls, no time limit.
Yeah.
There must be and where the third fall has to be a pinfall or submission for the title to change. Right. So it's like almost that famous 3 stages match Triple H and Austin had, where one was the cage, one was the wrestling match, one was no DQ. I would do something like that where Chris wins, she wins definitively the 2 out of 3 falls, but Mercedes wins the first fall and almost does something dumb in the match, gets disqualified to lose the second fall, and then Chris beats her finally. And that's how Chris wins 2 out of 3. That's what I would do because Mercedes is finally getting momentum in AEW and she's finally starting to see the crowd like appreciate her and people are starting to pay attention to her segments. You saw the rating with Fur and Anna Jay. They hardly had any drop off of the lead in. So she's hot right now. I wouldn't beat her now. I would let her collect the Rev Pro belt, maybe even Red Velvet's Ring of Honor belt, and then I would have her lose the AEW TBS title to Chris.
Yeah, I love Chris. And I just don't know that you don't want one of your belts on Mercedes though when you move over to Max, from
Fair,
the
yeah.
business side of it.
Mhm.
But here's where I'm conflicted. If Athena is going to be the first person to beat Mercedes, or Willow is going to be the first person to beat Mercedes, I don't know how book this with Chris in a way that works where Chris isn't ultimately the first person to beat her. Have they basically just told us Chris is the first have they is this rematch almost guaranteeing that Chris is going to be the first person to beat her? Some at some time.
It
Unless they're
does
just trying
feel
to
that
go
way.
yeah, unless they're just trying to go full heel Ric Flair heat where she just wins again and the AEW crowd's just pissed if that's the reaction they're looking for.
If she wins this time around and it's not a 30-minute draw, she has to win with cheating. Like somebody has to help her.
Yeah,
Um,
has to.
because then at that point I have to question why even the match happened so soon. I know Tony, if you or somebody in the AEW staff listens to this show, let the main event World's End. I don't want to see, a random tag match between Death Riders and I guess the Resistance main event. Um, Mercedes has been your best in like I know everybody's oh Will Ospreay, but I gotta be honest, Will Ospreay matches, as talented as he is and how great he is for what he does, they don't move me. And the reason I know they don't move the general audience is I see the ratings too. Like I see it. So Mercedes has something. She always has. She's a proven draw on the much bigger company. She's main evented WrestleMania. It's time for her Chris Part 2 to main event. Now, the problem with that is if it is a main event, you almost have to make Chris win at that point, right? Because if you do the 30-minute draw and that's how the pay-per-view ends, you do run the risk of people saying, "Oh, we went home unsatisfactory." But I would say it's part of a bigger story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the whole point is ratings, right? To do business. And
Yeah.
Mercedes and Chris are going to make each other look great. They're both fantastic. They had a top 5 match of the year earlier this year. It's probably Mercedes' third or fourth best match ever. Although crazy that I got likely passed 2 weeks later, which
Hmm.
she's just on a run, and maybe she'll pass it
Hmm.
again. You imagine if they one up it again. But
They can if they're given the
there's
25
a story.
minutes. Yeah.
The way that this match can be better than the first one, and even better than the Hazuki match, the bar is high. There's a story,
Yeah.
and so if they do what they did last time, maybe a little bit better with a little bit more investment from the crowd because of the story, sky's the limit, pun intended. But yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do, and that's why people tune in. So it's probably good business, and um, I don't know. I excited that they seem to be ramping up what she means in this company. They open with the Anna Jay match. They've properly covered how good the Hazuki match was, even though it happened, not on their promotion. I think it's been 2 or 3 video packages about it. And a rematch, if given the proper stature, again, if they main event at worst, open the show, there's going to be this will be the most crowd investment going into the match that she's had since the Willow match,
Yeah.
where people went into the match going, "Oh, I know their history. I'm excited to see what's going to happen." The Brit match was actually very, very well booked on
Mm.
weekly TV, but them physically didn't really have a history, right? So this could be very, very exciting.
Camille helping Chris.
Yeah, but if Chris is a squeaky clean baby face again, she
Yeah.
wouldn't take Camille's help.
Or Camille tries to come help her and she says, I don't want the help. And that ends up costing her the match. But these are hokey ways to book this match. I think you make it simple. You do the 30-minute time limit draw this time. You let Chris win the next match. It's the Okada Omega trilogy, same scenario. First time Mercedes wins, Okada wins. Second time as a draw, third time Omega wins, third time Chris wins. Off to the races you go. Where's World's End? Do you know?
Orlando.
Oh, Orlando. She's big in Orlando. She has a history in Orlando. That's where, obviously NXT was, or still is actually. Interesting. Okay.
It'd
I
be
would
very cool for her to main event in Orlando.
well,
That's
that's the
her.
other thing that's the other thing I was saying. Like there's a wrestling fan base that has seen her main event on a WWE pay-per-view. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what Tony does. Tony seems to never let the women main event. I know he did with Mariah and Mina, but that was because Tony Storm returned. So let's get to ratings. So there was a lot of controversy around this week's rating in the newsletter that I'm not going to openly reference, but everybody knows what I'm talking about because the person behind these ratings said on air, this is the greatest North American women's wrestling match ever. Said, I'm racking my brains. The quote is, I'm racking my brains trying to figure out others, but it's this, Charlotte Rhea, Britt Rosa. Those are the three he said.
I rolled my eyes at that third one, by the way.
Well,
But go ahead.
right. And it's funny because his own publication rolled its eyes at it too. So he says that was the greatest North American women's wrestling match ever. So now, common sense says, okay, if you've never rated a North American women's wrestling match at 4.75 above it, So I think five have gotten 4.75. It's Rosa Britt, Charlotte Rhea, Becky Charlotte, and Chris and Willow, I think. Their match.
Was that it?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
okay,
because it was another stip match. That would have been it.
yeah.
Yep.
So then I'm thinking, okay, so you have four at 4.75. You said this is the greatest, it has to get five, right? Because if you rate it 4.75, you're saying it's equal to those. Now, in his own reader polls, this match got the second highest approval rating ever besides Sasha Bailey Brooklyn, where there was no thumbs down. Like if you know his polls, he has thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs, whatever. Nobody gave this a thumbs down, which he was offended by because Will Ospreay matches have gotten thumbs down. And AEW matches that he loves have gotten thumbs down, like from the Bucks and from this. So it's like your own readers are telling you, dude, this is the second best women's wrestling match of all time in North America because the first you didn't give a 4.75, you give it a 5 or 4.5, but you admit you probably should have given it a higher rating. So then the letter comes out, it's 4.75, and everybody's like
Of
happy
course.
that Mercedes finally got a 4.75 match. But then they're like, wait a minute, you just said this was the best ever, and you gave it the same as four other matches. And then somebody asked him the question, why? And he said, well, I do think it's the best, but that doesn't mean it has to be a five. It means it's like 4.75, but it's a better 4.7. And then now he's like getting all tongue twisted because it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
I have a huge opinion on this bullshit.
Okay. So,
That
okay.
that
Uh,
particular part of it, I'll come
Go
back
ahead.
to.
No, no,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, no, no. Go ahead. It leads into my next set of props, but go ahead.
Dave break his scale for men and go past the five. He tweeted about degrees of 4.75s and they could have the same score, but one could be better. He's actually right. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
I said his name for the first time ever because I'm so mad. But he scores these matches 5.5, 6. He's broken his
Seven.
scale for 7. He's broken his scale for the men. But he taxes the women's matches and there's never been a 5 in North America. So when you yourself are willing to go above 5 for random matches people don't rewatch. By the way, Will Ospreay, Darby Allin got
Yeah.
Dynamite. It was a spot match.
Hmm.
They have this really cool, I did air quotes again, sequence that looks really, really cool. But to me, if you were fighting a human being, would never happen, and it takes me out of the match. But I know some people love it, you know.
Hmm.
And then Darby also almost killed himself, and he did a bump that Tony should not allow him to do. Um, Apron did a coffin drop onto the apron, and I feel strongly about this, and I'll tell you why. All it does AEW fans to actual other spots that are pretty dangerous themselves, and it numbs the crowd to them, and it makes it harder for everyone in the back to get reaction. A coffin drop onto the edge of the apron, that's a ridiculous bump. It really is a ridiculous bump. And he's just making all of his coworkers' lives harder because it becomes like blood or nothing, right? To peak that fan base. But can score two matches the same and one be better than the other if you're scoring to 5. But once you broke that scale for the men, it only looks like you're punishing the women and have a women's tax.
But he punished North American women because
True.
he has famously graded Japanese women's matches after he broke the scale with Okada Omega, gave it 7 out of 5 or 7.5 or some ridiculous, it was just like
Yeah.
foolishness. Utami and I think it's Siri got 5.25 out of 5. Right. He broke the scale for those two women. Now, he didn't do it for any Minami Toyota match, even though she got 13 5-star matches, which is by far the most any woman has had. But he did it for this match in New Japan or Stardom because he has to, because he has broken it for the men. But for some reason, he has a brain block when it comes to North American women's wrestling.
Yep.
Not North American women's wrestlers, particularly, because like Mercedes had everything set up for the five. Japanese woman, long duration of a match, spots, crowd into it. She had everything teed up for a five.
Near falls, near finishes.
Everything that when you look at how he grades matches and how he grades them, they did it. The fact that he had to say, me and my friends don't argue that one 4.75 is better than the other, that's a lie. Everybody does that because that's the whole point of ratings. Whether you agree or disagree, you
You
argue the
rank the
number,
matches.
right?
Yeah.
So Sasha Bailey got 4.5. Charlotte Becky got 4.75. If we're being brutally honest, nobody who actually watches wrestling could say Becky Charlotte was better than Sasha Bailey. You can't say it. You can to be different, but you really can't say it. So my next set of props. So if you're a hip hop historian, the Source magazine was the source of truth in the 90s for with their mic ratings. So early on, they gave a bunch of albums 5 mics at the introduction of the magazine. The first three issues, I said episodes, issues of the Source, I believe they gave 6 5-mic ratings. America's Most Wanted, Ice Cube. I'm doing this off the top of my head. Brand Nubian, One for All. Uh, People's Native Instinctive Travels, Tribe Called Quest. De La Soul is Dead. Later on, Low End Theory got 5 mics, and then there was another one that got 5 mics. I got to think about it, but then for years they didn't give 5 mics, and then Nas came out with Illmatic, which I have already displayed here, and they gave it 5 mics. So then it's like, cool. It takes a lot of work to get 5 mics, but there are albums after that have gotten 5 mics that are not as good as the album I'm about to show you. So Enter the 36 Chambers by Wu-Tang got 4.5. Now, if we look back on it, that getting 4.5 is exactly like Sasha Bailey getting 4.5. Because
Right.
there are not too many albums better than this one. And Nas himself, when I interviewed him way back when, told me this album is as every bit as good as Illmatic. That's coming from him himself. That should have got 5. So should Sasha Bailey. So it's like but the Source retro corrected themselves. So they did an issue where this album ended up getting 5. Another album I'm going to show you, which is in your wheelhouse here. This album got 4.5. They retroed and gave it 5, but this should have got 5 from the first time it was released. My point here is if
He needs to retro.
yes, no, I mean this. I mean this because in order for him to fix his scale, if he went back and gave Sasha Bailey 5, nobody's arguing any other match after that.
For North, yeah. I mean,
You can't then, if that's the 5, then you can make a case that Hazuki Mercedes is 4.75. Because that is the gold standard of women's wrestling matches in North America. It just is. But the fact that there have been 5 matches rated above it, and how many have been rated at the same number as that at 4.5? There's many. Hell,
I know.
Mercedes has like a bunch, right?
Yeah, the has a bunch. There was a crappy, and I mean this, there was a crappy Death Riders on Wednesday. It was bad, and he gave it a 4.5.
I mean, Bianca has,
It was bad.
Bianca has as many. She has a lot of 4.5 star matches that are, same level of like that. My point is 4.5 doesn't mean anything anymore. Like
No,
it has no real meaning because A, he broke his scale, and two, the greatest women's match in North American wrestling history, he gave 4.5 to, and now 4.5 looks like such a diminished rating. It puts it like when he off the top of his head listed North American women's wrestling matches, he didn't even list that. He didn't even say Sasha Bailey Brooklyn. He said, oh, Charlotte Rhea. Oh, Rosa Britt. But Sasha Bailey, his own readers said, is the most beloved match of his polls.
it's just proof that he's stubborn and a troll. And we we talked about it for his scale for 10 minutes now, and
Yeah.
some people might think we're giving too much power to it. We talked about it on maybe last week or the week before. The issue is that he has the history, right? So we could start grading matches right now and take it very, very, very seriously. Um, and you could grade matches on videotape, but it's not the same as watching it in the moment for the first time and close to the event of when it happened. Some of these matches, you go back and watch them, and they might have been a 5, and they're not a 5 anymore because they just don't hold up as well. And I'm talking men's and women's. Just think of all of history of wrestling. So it's disappointing he's screwing up because he has the database that you would want to hold to. Um, Mike, who's been on the show before, and other people point out, generally he doesn't score good matches below a 4. So the best way to take his rating seriously is to just count how many 4s someone has as compared to everyone else, because you got a lot of matches that are a 4 that should be a 4.5, and a 4.5 that should be a
Mm,
4.75, and 4.75 that should be a 5. But generally, if they get to the 4, they're good, and if they're below a
mhm.
4, there is something you could nitpick on it. I think he's missed 3 or 4 Mercedes matches that should be a 4 or higher that he's got at like 3.75, but that's the most accurate version of his scale is for counting how many 4s someone's gotten. My my favorite place to look is Cagematch. Take the tribalism out of it, which they do actually. If they see someone who's just going in and downgrading stuff and they don't have a history, although people are getting smarter, you'll go the people who Hazuki Mercedes low. They don't count your score unless you put a synopsis. And the whole synopsis is about how AEW doesn't present Mercedes well, and they don't like the way AEW structures matches, and it's all AEW, and they scored it a 3 out of 10. It's like, brother, this is not an AEW match. This was an NJPW match, and if you watched it, you would have known that. So hopefully they take stuff like that out. But the entertainment business rarely, if you pull the customer in masses, the customer is rarely going to be wrong.
Yeah.
But
I,
there is
I would,
tribalism, and people are going to hate stuff just to hate it.
and that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a sector of fan base when it comes to Mercedes that were like these humongous Sasha Banks fans. But once she left, in my opinion, I'm using a team analogy, like WWE is their team. And it's like she left that team and went to AEW, she's dead to us. But
Right.
wrestling isn't sports. Like again, I know later this year, probably next week. I think it's the 20. Yeah, it is next week. Next week, when Mercedes Chris F part 2, you'll be at Rams Cardinals,
I will.
right? And is that an afternoon game?
I think it's 5 p.m. Western time, so that'll be 8 p.m. Eastern time.
It's the Sunday night game.
Pretty sure.
Hmm. I mean, I'd be
Uh,
happy if it was.
my wife said it was 5 p.m. So we're for those who don't know, even though I'm the Lions fan, she loves Matthew Stafford. So
Well, she also likes the Rams.
yeah, well, she likes the Rams because of Matthew Stafford. 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific. So yeah, it's the night game.
Oh, okay.
Um,
All right.
as,
Okay.
as
So
soon as
so
yeah, as soon as Matthew Stafford retires, she'll be a Lions fan again, probably.
So okay, so so this is your first time seeing Stafford play, is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
I was broke
So
when he was playing for the Lions. Not broke, but
you probably didn't want to go to those games anyway.
the couple years we were good, I was moving, a lot of stuff going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, I never saw him. And I have family in Detroit. It's not easy to go to a game and not like make that a whole thing. So
So okay, so you have Stafford. Okay, so you're going to see this game next Sunday. Um, what I was saying is Matt Stafford, I know he is probably your favorite quarterback of all time.
he's
Fair?
got someone on his heels, man. But yeah, yeah.
Well, okay, of course, if Goff wins the Super Bowl, Stafford's gonna have to hit the bricks. Like he's not gonna be number one anymore, right? But up to this point, it's him. But it leads to my point. Stafford was the Lions quarterback, and you were a fan, and you loved the Lions, and you loved him. He went to the Rams. You still rooted for him in LA, but you didn't hate him because he left your team because you understand about circumstances. But you're still more supportive of your team. Fans can be more supportive of WWE. Fair. But then don't take it out on her because she made a better life for herself. Matt Stafford, whether no matter what where you rank him, and I have a different opinion and I will not offend you on this podcast, but like he went to a better situation. You cannot be mad at him about that, right? You cannot be
No,
mad
and
at him about that.
I think anyone who's listened to us, if you guys know my Twitter handle, because the only thing I used to talk about on Twitter was, wrestling. So I put, and all I watched back then was WWE. So I put WWE in my Twitter handle for no serious reason other than I was just trying to come up with something that no one else had. Um, but if you've listened to us, do not support these companies over the wrestler. Have a favorite
Yeah,
company. Have a favorite
yeah.
company, please. Consume, want to consume. If you have a negative opinion about a wrestler who's negative opinion is just because of where they wrestle, not because of who they are or what they do, you know, WWE is not paying your bills. AEW is not paying your bills. There's no reason to hate a wrestler because, especially someone who went out and got paid more, and other women are now going to get paid more because of the courage that she had to go leap to another situation. And we don't have time for it as we wrap up this podcast, but I'm gonna go ahead and argue you got WWE women getting paid more than ever now.
Hmm.
Mercedes helped with that. And number two, you know how much courage it took for her to do this because no one else is doing it yet. And they're doing it to their own detriment. I'm just going to say something. You look at the way Natty's being booked. I just don't know why she didn't take the leap to go to AEW.
Hmm.
Um,
No, I would agree.
and I'm only calling Natty out specifically because it was her time in the contract. There's only so much TV time, and I think Mercedes took a leap of faith to have the type of matches she wanted to have, and she's being paid dividends for it. And you know, this is not like sports where if you get signed to a big contract, the team basically is planning to use you. WWE signs people to a contract and hoards them.
Yes.
Um, And if that's what they want to do, that's fine. Again, I don't dislike Natty for her decision. I don't dislike Chad Gable for staying. Um, I just hope that they were told the role was going to be honestly before they resigned because Chad Gable fans thought him resigning meant an IC belt run or something like that. And that hasn't materialized yet either. And I'm sure Tony does the same thing over on the AEW side. Or people perceive that he does. Again, it's not about company. They're probably both not trustworthy, but um, back and forth between the two is only going to make we have to pay more and W have to pay more. That's what we're rooting for because true free agency in that way is going to continue to get more dollars to the workers.
So as we wrap, we haven't talked any WWE at all, which is probably good as well because we cover a lot of WWE
Yep.
most weeks. Just to quick give everybody what happened this past week. So it was established Liv Rhea Monday Night Raw, January 6th, first Netflix show for the
Yep.
title. Feels like Rhea's going to win the title. I could be wrong, but it feels like this feud is finally going to come to an end. Rhea's going to get her belt back.
I
On the
would say very, very likely.
SmackDown side, Tiffany is getting closer and closer to cashing in. You know, this past week, as Nia and Candice prepared for their tag title match, the last shot was Tiffany's eyes looking at Nia's belt as Nia walked by her. So we know that's coming soon.
And they said they didn't need
Um,
her help too, so they're kind of ostracizing her as well.
very disappointed in WWE that you have the new United States Women's Champion Chelsea Green, and she was nowhere to be found on SmackDown. Not a promo, not a vignette, not an in-ring segment, not her on Grayson Waller effect, talking about being the champ. Like, what's next for her? You just gave her this belt. She got a great reaction. People were happy for her. Where is she? I didn't like that. I'm gonna be honest there. Nothing. I think she's great. I just don't like the way that that was set up. Um, we definitely have something going with Bianca Naomi. You know, Naomi is now one half of the women's tag champs as Jade is out of action indefinitely. Um, if you notice the subliminal storytelling this week, Bianca held both belts. Naomi said, I want to earn the belt. I want to show that I'm part of the team. She got the pin with the
Yep.
split legged moonsault. Bianca gave her the belt. And then after they did an interview where Naomi kind of acknowledged she never lost that belt either.
Yep.
So now it's obvious Naomi is behind the Jade attack.
And she's been thinking about how she never lost that belt, right?
Yeah,
That's that
yeah,
subtle
yeah,
seed
yeah. So,
planting.
so it's obvious that Naomi is behind it, and are they setting up Naomi Bianca at WrestleMania? I got to be honest, if that's the direction they're going to go in, bravo! I'm all for it. I want the match. Naomi deserves the spotlight. Bianca will obviously win the match. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. I'd be shocked if Miss WrestleMania streak is broken by Naomi. Nothing against Naomi, but I think Rhea Ripley would do it or somebody coming up.
Well,
And I don't think Rhea's
Triple
doing it
H
either, by the way.
with Triple H booking the show, I would almost bet a lot of money that Rhea Ripley is going to be the first person to beat Bianca Belair at WrestleMania. And I mean that if that sounds like I agree with it, correct. I wouldn't necessarily do that. I would be open to picking Bianca over Rhea, depending on where they were at the moment, right? Who's hotter, because
Yeah.
it's still a ways away. But Triple H's booking history would suggest that Rhea is going to beat Bianca when they wrestle.
Yeah, and I think this is a fair statement to make as we wrap up 2024. I think Bianca's a better in-ring wrestler than Rhea. Like, I just think she's better in the ring than Rhea.
Easily,
Right. Yeah.
easily.
I just think she's a better wrestler than Rhea Ripley currently. I can make a case that other than merchandise, she is as good at Rhea as Rhea in every category, whether it's media, press, make a wish, crowd reaction, all that stuff. I mean, she's right there. I don't know if I would have Rhea beat Bianca either. I might save the Bianca loss at WrestleMania for somebody who you want to elevate to the next level. Whether it's Roxanne, whether it's Stephanie Vacour, whether it's Julia, whether it's the returning Mercedes Moné. I'm joking there. I would save it. I just think Rhea doesn't need to beat Bianca Belair. She's done everything else. She has everything else. Like, give that to somebody who really needs the rub, not Rhea Ripley.
Right,
I
but
think Rhea's gotten enough.
yeah, and if they're going to wrestle, though, a winner has to be picked. And I'm not saying it can't be Rhea. I think a lot of it will have to do with where they are, down
Sorry.
the road when that happens, story and all that alignment. But um, I think we're both saying that you can make the argument if you had to rank, you know, that roster. I think, you know, Rhea's popularity has gotten to the top levels this year, but the work has gotten less good. And that happens. Roman's work is less good than ever, and he's more popular than ever. And he, you know, I'm a Roman fan. I have big dog shirts. You know what I mean? And like his ring work is not, it used to be great. You know, it's just not good. It's very, um, it's kind of one note. And uh, I think if they're going to make him a tweener or a face, I need to see some sit out power bombs and some of these moves that will pop the crowd. Anyway, that's a whole other subject. But
Yeah,
I think Rhea and Liv need a good match. The WWE women need a good match. A
yeah,
little foreshadowing. At some point, either next weekend or the weekend after, probably we'll need to do 2 weeks from now.
yeah,
We are going to rank our 2024 matches. We could have done it next week, but Mercedes are wrestling on Saturday night. I will
yeah.
see it at some point, but um, I think we need time to let it settle before we try to rank it too. Um,
Now, yeah. Have you ever been to SoFi
WWE
Stadium?
have not.
They
Real
have
quick
one of the
though,
best Wi-Fi setups. Just FYI for you.
do they? Okay. Uh, WWE women, and you could think I'm a hater. I'm trying to rewatch every match I should consider.
Okay.
I'm trying to rewatch every match that we should consider. Um, Bailey EO is going to be a top three match, if not a top two match. It's I have no qualms saying that right now. There's one match I know is ahead of it. There might be a second one. It's two or three. I'm having a hard time finding WWE women's matches that will make the top 10. And I do grade a little bit if it happened on a big event on a PLE. Bailey or Io Bianca, Bianca Piper, those are great TV matches. But that same match or a similar match as good happening on a pay-per-view in a different company, I'm gonna grade the moment
Hmm.
bigger. So I'm having a hard time. We talked about several episodes ago. They haven't delivered on the PLEs to the level that they used to. So I know it's not a PLE, but it might as well be. The Rhea Liv match
That
needs to be a
that
home
is
run.
that is for all intents and purposes a PLE. Last thing before we wrap, you and I had a dialogue about you don't count wrestling in Marigold as a WWE match, right? Like you count that as a WWE wrestler wrestling in Marigold, and it's that promotion's match.
Correct. I consider that the same as Mercedes wrestling in NJPW. She's an
Okay,
AEW
gotcha.
talent. So for EO's resume for Wrestler of the Year absolutely gets helped by her Marigold match.
Yeah.
Same as Mercedes wrestling in NJPW. So it'll help EO, but it doesn't help when I say matches that occurred under the because who produced the match matters, right? And they didn't produce that match.
I thought EO Live was really good for Live. I don't know if I actually will admit this now. I haven't done my final list, but it did knock EO for me. I thought EO was the clear cut wrestler of the year for the women in 2024. Mercedes has had two amazing matches, and truth be told, EO hasn't had a landmark standout match in like 3 months, 4 months, whatever the last time her and Bianca had the match. That's a long time. That's a third of the year, right? So
Yeah.
I was hoping EO Live, even if EO lost, would be like a classic. And the truth is, what it showed people is Liv could hang with EO, but it didn't really do anything for EO. In fact, and we could talk about this next week as a uh, you know, breadcrumb for next week. There's a belief on the internet or Twitter that EO Sky is Hulk Hogan. That she now, because she did the favor for Liv, is going to win the Intercontinental Women's title because she is an injury replacement for Kyrie Pin Natty, who there was a groundswell of support that they wanted her to win the belt. Well, she's already gone. And I look at these brackets and I'm like, how does Io not win this title?
100%.
Like I don't. And okay, so to be fair, and everybody knows I'm a huge Io Sky fan. I think Io is the right first champion. Not the way they did it though. To
Right.
me, her replacing Kyrie isn't the way I would have got her there. I would have had her in the tournament from the beginning. I would have had her maybe beat Natty in the finals, not first round, because then Natty still gets that, oh, look at me, I'm still here rub. Yeah, I don't think she's booked like, I think people are taking it a little overboard with the Rhea, Bianca, Io are the Hogan, Hall, Nash of the women's division. But to be fair, when they lose, it seems like the next thing they get is a belt, those three, or something. So there is
Yeah.
some truth to that, whether people want to admit it or not. So, we can end there. But I know you're flying to California this week sometime.
Christmas Eve. Uh,
Ah, so
yeah.
you are flying Tuesday.
What day?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Tuesday.
okay.
Tickets were like half the price.
Hmm.
Obviously we're trying to get there for Christmas, but everyone's like, "Oh my God, what if you get delayed or whatever?" It's like we don't have, small kids or anything like that where it's going to be like we ruin Christmas. We're just trying to get out there, get some nice weather for Christmas and New Year's Eve. My mother-in-law is still out there, so spend some time with family. Um, and just enjoy California where we both grew up, but enjoy it as a little bit tourists and a little bit family time. So
All
gonna
right.
be there from Christmas Eve to New Year's Day, and so when we record next week, I will be doing so from my mother-in-law's house.
Oh, well, that's exciting. I've definitely recorded the show from hotel room, so at least you're in a little bit more comfortable setting. But yeah, excited for next week. Excited to see. It sucks that we're gonna record before Stat Mercedes, right?
No, it's on Saturday, isn't it? Am I crazy?
What, the Rams Cardinals play on Saturday?
The Rams game is on Saturday, yeah.
Oh, okay, then it is. You're right. It is Saturday.
So what I will try to do, obviously, is uh get home that night and just watch it before I go to sleep. That way I've seen it.
Okay. All right, so we will have it next week. Okay, cool. So safe travels to California.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy the weather, and we'll talk next week.
Hey, thank you to everyone for listening and Merry Christmas, Happy
Merry Christmas,
Hanukkah, Joyous
happy Hanukkah,
Kwanzaa,
happy holidays.
Happy Holidays. Appreciate y'all.